We all look at the people coming through the back door because they are late. This is what school teachers do, I believe. They all look at them and they go, hurry up, why are you late? And if I knew everybody's name, I'd name them as they came. Louise is running late, Andrew's coming in late. I do know a few of them. Well, good afternoon. I hope you had a really good lunch. I hope it's not too full in your belly because we've got some really great speakers to continue with. I don't know about you, but I've been very inspired this morning, and I just get you to follow me, and I hope all of you have had the chance to look at this wonderful wall. And if you haven't, you need to do this in your break. But Ben has been sketching for us, and I hope you guys have been sketching as you go, but he's been sketching our speakers and the main things and the pickups. It's brilliant, doesn't it look fabulous? It looks brilliant. Well done, Ben. And a part for Ben is that you too can sketch like this. You can. I've been trying and it works. So you just got to practice and practice, but we can all do it. So this has just been a brilliant grab shot of our time this morning, and it will continue. The reason why you've got me and not Mitch is because Mitch is about to come up here and give us some time to speak about himself and his My Sleep movement. So if I can just introduce him to you. He's a passionate mental health advocate and founder of the international anti-stigma campaign Heart on My Sleeve movement. He has a professional background in global marketing and media, working for companies such as Microsoft. He's struggled with debilitating mental illness symptoms for most of his life. However, from this, he's been able to connect with others and build a human support network that aims to eradicate the stigma associated with mental health. In 2017, when the Heart on My Sleeve movement launched, it reached 1 million people in less than a week and featured on Triple J, Sydney Morning Herald, Channel 10's The Project, and many other Australian media outlets. Since then, Mitch has achieved a master's degree in psychology from Columbia University in New York. We are honoured to have him here today with us to chair this, to MC the symposium. And now he is going to share with us now how he used his lived experience to start a movement. Can you please welcome Mitch?
I'm going to break the mold and I'm going to roam if that's okay, because I feel like I've switched roles, but I want to stay in the old role too, if that's alright. I also took off my jacket, as you'll notice, because I felt like I looked like an African safari tour guide, so I was like, what the hell's going on there? So I still kind of look like that, but less so, which is good. I'm really excited to share my story with you and kind of the work that I'm doing in the mental health space, because it's really different to what I grew up doing, that's for sure, which I'll talk about. But why this is so important to me is because I feel like it's a safe space for me to start unpacking some stuff. But 2 years ago, I wouldn't have been able to even stand in this room. And the reason is I've had a long history with anxiety and OCD, but in particular, I was diagnosed with one of many things, including dementophobia, which is the fear of being or going insane. Which is ironic, considering my line of work now, and ironic considering this room, and that's why I could confidently start the whole symposium by saying we need to embrace our crazy, coming from the guy, right? So I learned how to actually take my own advice now, which is cool. So this question really bothered me for a long time. It almost saw me lose my life, actually, because I didn't really know who I was. I had a sense of it from what my outside world was telling me, but on the inside I was very confused about what that meant. So kind of chapter one of my story starts when I was a young kid. I was born and raised on a farm, despite my hipster appearance now. I was actually a salt of the earth country boy at the start of things. My mum was a horse riding instructor. She had me when she was 23. My parents got divorced when she was 25, so when I was 2. So from the early stages, it was kind of just mum and I. And she is one of the main reasons, if not the reason, why I'm still here. I tell you that because of how important relationships are and how they are the bedrock to everything in my life, and I think those who live and thrive with mental health conditions. Childhood was fairly normal. Went on, my mum met my stepdad, we moved to Mossman, so I was at about 10 or 11, got brought then into affluence and a very privileged upbringing. And part of the reason why I do what I do now is because if we're in a state of privilege, we need to be able to use that to be in service to others. And I think a lot of us here are in that position, and we can use that platform to give back. But as a teenager, things became even more normal. I was going to a school in North Sydney, was getting really good grades, representing the school in state sport, hanging out with the cool kids, dating girls, all the developmental things were being ticked, so that was all good. Straight after high school, I was DJing at some of the top clubs around Sydney, kind of toying with the tension of pursuing a career in music or going down the corporate route, which is where I ended up going. I went to Sydney University and did my undergraduate degree in commerce. And there kind of started my adult life. The commerce degree then led me on to a job at Microsoft in the third chapter. So I got picked up as the youngest intern at Microsoft Australia, and I still hold that title. I worked in the company for 5 years in Australia, where I worked on retail marketing, the launch of Windows 10, the launch of Windows Phone, a whole bunch of stuff with Officeworks, Harvey Norman, JB Hi-Fi, how they market the Windows category and drive share against Apple, which is a really fucking hard job, just between you and me. I did some cool stuff there, got put on the map. They flew me over to Seattle in a global role. So by 26, I'm in Seattle. They give me a multi-million-dollar business to run. I'm managing worldwide relationships, deciding which countries products go into, building SKU margin, economic forecasts for multi-millions of dollars worth of products. It was my job to make Surface, which is their hardware division, a division that Microsoft had just entered after decades of being in the software space. So it was like a startup within a behemoth. They're like, we have to drive a cool perception of Surface. So I'm like, okay, again, no small feat. So I fly to Milan, have parties with Vogue at Design Week, and we throw these big events. I go back to LA. I'm in private meeting rooms with Robert Downey Jr. and other Hollywood celebrities, pitching them on how to use our products and technology. I was driving a Porsche, presenting at Fashion Week here in Sydney, the whole works. You literally could not have painted a better outside life of what a young man could have been living. Now, I know that we've been talking about a lot of stuff today that was quite heavy, but this particular thing that I'm about to show you is particularly heavy. So if for whatever reason you feel triggered, please feel free to take a breath and no kind of gossiping or talking about it afterwards, and return if and when you feel safe. And I'm sure we have a bunch of professionals in the room that can assist that process.
Recording this in a hotel room in Louisville, Kentucky, on the 6th of September 2024. I don't know why I picked up my computer to do this, but the feelings that I've felt over the last 26 years, I wouldn't wish them on my worst enemy. I have been through the fire, been right into the deep belly, the worst place in the world. And I never want anyone, ever, to feel this. You have no idea what people go through. And I will devote every second of my life, if I get through this, to making sure that no one has to go through this again.
That was my reality. And that's the reality of a lot of people that you don't see behind closed doors. In fact, 1 in 2 of us at some point in our life, 1 in 4 of us as we know. Now in this particular symposium, we're talking about the really pointy end of stuff. But even when it doesn't get so pointy, it's still bloody hard. And I feel like I've been to Hell's Gates, and yet you would never, ever, ever think that about someone like me. And the reality is that I remember being 7 years old, sitting in the car outside Woolworths, and my mum saw me repetitively touching the dashboard of her car, blinking over and over, saying the words God. And she stopped at me and looked at me and said, "What are you doing?" And I said, "I don't know, but I always feel upset. I think that I'm a bad person." And I was convinced of this. It was my first belief system that I really can identify with, that I'm a bad person. And so we went to the doctor, and the doctor said, "Well, yeah, it looks like Mitch has acute obsessive compulsive disorder and the onset of anxiety." And that I did. And that was my first kind of official meeting point of what's been a lifetime battle with mental ill health. And my OCD is one of many flavors of things that I've gone through, but it was by no means like I need to straighten books. This was almost bordering, well, pretty much delusional as to how serious it got. But even as an 8-year-old, I remember not being able to leave my bedroom for 30, 40 minutes because if I didn't fold my pajamas a certain exact way, my whole family was going to die. And it wasn't like that was a thought, that was every part of my reality said that that is 100% true. And there was nothing I could do to dispel that feeling or thought of how tactile it was. It was visceral. It plagued every part of my life. It latched onto anything I cared about and just drilled in. Any freedom, any respite, anything I loved, it made me believe that I was bad and wrong and that things were going to go horribly. It was a terrible, terrible way to live. And as a kid who hasn't even hit puberty yet, that was normal. That was what happens. As a young teenager, I got really good at looking really normal. I got really good at burying the compulsions, which is actually, looking back on it now in a clinical lens, a monumental feat, and I don't really know how I squashed the compulsions, but the obsession stayed and the anxiety kind of sprayed outwards. And I would say that this second narrative emerged in my teenage years, which is I am a crazy person, for sure. Now that definition is so skewed and different and embraced in my mind, but back then that plagued me to lengths that I couldn't put into words with the English language. And the OCD kind of spiraled into panic disorder. And then I think the thing that got me most was depersonalization. That thing, it is really, and I can't go into it now even because it'll trigger me, but that has been seriously, seriously painful stuff because it's a very, very confusing, understudied, underdiagnosed, undertreated aspect of mental ill health that often gets dealt with as anxiety or OCD or depression or something that triangles anything other than an inability to feel like you can be present in your body but fully conscious and in touch with reality. So that is tension. That is tension when all you want to do is run away from yourself, but you don't know why you feel like you're on the precipice of hell at all points in time. So I remember being in Thailand, sitting on a beach with my girlfriend at the time and a bunch of mates, putting a beer in the sand, looking out over this perfect sunset and thinking to myself, I don't want to be alive anymore. And that started to worry me because then this whole disparity of outer, inside, delta, like that gap was widening, and that was terrifying. But because my career was going so well, I was like, I'm going to ride this thing until the wheels fall off. And I have to be smart enough to be able to get my way out of this. And there were bouts of me going into professional therapy. But I was petrified that any of my belief systems would be affirmed or validated, that I was bad or I was crazy, so I was like, don't even go there. And then also, when I did work up the immense courage to go into those rooms, I felt like there was that tiny moment where I worked up the courage to tell my story and say what I was going through, and I call it the dreaded left eyebrow raise, where there's that 0.2 of a second time where they go, okay, and I'm like, shit, they missed it. They missed me. I just slipped through. They don't get it. They don't get me. They didn't catch me in the system that's designed to catch me, and if I fall through this net, there's nowhere else to go. So, trigger someone who doesn't want to be in their skin, heightened to the highest extent because I'm like, there is no safety anywhere. There is no safety in someone else, there's no safety in me. Now, that's when my third belief system emerged, which is, I'm not just a bad person, I'm not just a crazy person, but I have to do it alone. So I literally, while I was working for Microsoft in Seattle, went up to my manager at the time and said, hey, I know we have a massive global launch coming that I am the international product lead for, but I need to take a few weeks off and go to New York. And she's like, okay. What I'd actually done in the background was research degrees in psychology, got accepted to Columbia University, flew over in an intensive semester, and thought I need to educate my way into survival. So I literally attended a degree. First up, first hour of the first day, I'm like, fuck, I hope this works. Because the outlook after this isn't good. So I get there, and I remember listening to this lecture, and like, Columbia University offers this certain stream of clinical psychology, which is like the mutants of the world. It's like the X-Men. They don't just look at it from like CBT lens, they fully humanistic. It was perfect, it was exactly where I needed to be. And I remember feeling in the first hour, I'm like, this is what I was put on the earth to do. Like without a doubt in my mind. To help heal myself and as many people as I can, help heal others and bring them on a journey. If possible, if I can ever see the light. But I couldn't, because at the same time that I had this immense vision, I was feeling so trapped in my story. And that reconciled itself for me, I didn't have to, because I broke down into a million pieces. And without having a say in it, I ended up getting real sick, to the point where I couldn't leave my bedroom. I was crying all day, every day. My OCD was unlivable, and the depersonalization off the scale. And so, when you're really at those moments, things start to become clear, because your ego has got nothing left to defend, it's got nothing left to hold on to, which is somewhat of a miracle. But it was this man here who, I mentioned my mum, who's a person, there's the reason I'm still alive, but this guy's the reason that things changed. I was in my bedroom, as I said, could hardly leave, picked up a computer, stumbled across a YouTube video that is, in every sense of the word, a godsend. And he's no one famous, he's got a couple hundred views, and his name's Harris, and he sat in his bedroom and he told his story about what he'd been through. And it was the first time in my entire life that I'd felt understood. It was the first time ever where someone had put words to sensations, experiences, thoughts, behaviors, even the most irrational shit that I'm like, there is no beating heart human being brain in the world that has gone through this ever, because it is that whacked. And he said it. And in a single instant, my life tectonically shifted. Notice I didn't say it got better, it shifted. And what shifted was a realization that my entire life, I just wanted someone to get it. I wanted a place to put this story. I wanted a place to put all those belief systems and not have to carry them on my own and someone say it's safe here. And that guy who I'd never met on the internet allowed me to do that. He allowed me to have permission to be me, which in turn reduced so much shit. Because I could let go of those stories. I could let go of those narratives that were taking up so much room. And essentially I realized that that suffering and pain are two separate things, right? And mental health doesn't require an absence of problems. If that was the case, the whole of Africa would be institutionalized. Okay, so a lot of mental health is actually pivoting to an existing experience in a new relationship. And in my view, feeling connected and understood to someone else who gets it is the catalyst, it is the steroid, it is the quickest way to shift your relationship to an existing problem. And notice how much quality of life you retain simply by pivoting as opposed to removing. Now, that in which it doesn't solve completely, it gives you the room to remove the excess. Notice when I started the symposium, I said mental ill health, as defined by the likes of Dr. Dan Siegel, who's, by the way, a personal mentor of mine, he's a UCLA psychiatrist, says that mental illness is actually is rigidity or chaos in its extreme form. Mental health is integration. So really, we're not trying to remove anything, we're trying to get to the outermost parts, and we're trying not to be too chaotic or too rigid, and we stay in that middle ground, and that's us. So I'm like, okay, I have personally seen the power of relating to one person's story that's given me the ability to shift my relationship to an existing problem, and then remove the froth off the top of the beer, and love the shit out of the rest of that beer. And I was like, that's mental health. Right, thank you. So as an obsessive guy, I'm still very sick at this point. I moved back home to Australia, quit my job at Microsoft, continued my study online, but basically had nothing left. And I was at home and I started to become fascinated with like, how could one guy's story transform my life without a bit of medication or therapy or whatever else, right? And I was like, okay, going back to that sentiment, it's because I released stories that had me trapped, and not to get too meta, but I believe mental illness is an infection of narratives more than anything. It allowed me to release the old narrative, make way for a new one, and then give space to remove the excess that was doing damage. So, I found 6 things that led to good mental health, and we're not going to unpack these 6 things today. What we're going to unpack is the top one, because that's the most important by a huge way. So, connection is everything. As I said, if it's not the cure, it is absolutely the catalyst, and that in which connection doesn't fix in and of itself gives you the room to do the work. Okay? Now, what do we think? If connection's the economy that we need to operate in to get well, what's the currency of connection? Conversation. Okay? It connects me to you. It allows me to feel seen and understood. It's also the thing that I spend doing to myself all day, every day. So there's an outer and inner conversation that dictates the quality of our material world, because connection is our #1 factor of thriving. So I'm like, I'm going to get really bloody good at having conversations, also known as telling stories. But not just any type of conversation. Because we're having somewhat of a conversation in Australia right now. What we're not doing is having a real one. We're not getting down to the brass tacks and letting people actually say, this is me. This is me and that is you. And in all its horribleness and beauty, it is real. That's the transformational factor. And I know for a fact that the science backs it. 3 key studies in particular. One saying that it's the quality of the relationship between therapist and patient that it has more of a predictive outcome on someone's successful treatment than the actual type of treatment that they use in the therapy session. And there's a meta-analysis of a whole bunch of studies that you guys can go and look up. The second thing is, I'm fortunate enough to have some pretty awesome mentors. Another one is Dr. Dan Brown, Harvard psychologist, who I've recorded a podcast with on Real Talk. You can go listen to it. And I studied under him for a few days. And it is abundantly clear from studies that he's done and that he's referenced, like the Minnesota longitudinal study, that the attachment style, i.e. the ability to feel seen, to feel understood, to connect with people in healthy relationships, play far more of a role than things even like genetics. And that in inpatient units, they couldn't find a more common factor between people in inpatient units than disorganized attachment. In fact, there's no way I'm going 5 minutes, I'm sorry. There's like 10 minutes to go, so I hope you can hang in there with me. There's the treating the trauma in complex trauma, where there was disorganized attachment, which is almost every case, that they treated the disorganized attachment and it had better results than treating the trauma. So what they thought was complex PTSD is therefore aggravated attachment style way more than it is an episodic trauma, because 2 people can go through the same trauma, one person gets affected, the other one doesn't. Why is that? Because they can relate to their experience or their problem in a certain way, and they can remove the excess better, in my opinion, which is largely dictated by their ability to connect since childhood all the way through to adulthood. Does this logic make sense so far?
Yes.
Okay. So, that's supposed to do stuff. Well, long story short, I moved back to Australia, walked down to Balmoral Beach, drew a heart on my arm, told my story, released a video, and that video reached 1 million people in less than a week, and a global movement was born where people all around the world started tattooing hearts on their arms, hence the tattooed heart on my arm, coming forward telling their story, wanting to be connected. Because they realised that they wanted to be understood far more than they wanted to be cured. They wanted to be connected far more than they wanted someone to take the problem away. Because feeling connected was taking the problem away. Now, that is what you call the best feeling in the world for me. Because it allowed me to make sense and make meaning from a lifetime of pain. And show other people that there was a way to feel seen and heard, and also a place to come to feel understood, or at least receive the stories of someone else. Now, in less than 2 years, we're one of the fastest growing mental health organisations in the country. We've been incubated by KPMG. We're working with 15,000 plus people, companies, transforming the conversation that leadership are having with their employees. We're building peer support programs that are absolutely cutting edge. We're doing storytelling and cultural change programs where I coached someone to get up in front of their entire organisation 2 weeks ago and tell a story of sexual abuse and cancer survival when she told 5 people in her entire life, and since then she said her entire life narrative of who she is has inflected and changed. Because she's allowed to be real. Because the tension of hiding is no more present, and the defences are down, and she can live authentically. Now, we did that in a very safe way, but you get the Uber. So what I'm here to do is say, can we challenge the way we are doing things? Because just because we've done them one way doesn't mean they're going to take us into where we need to go. The current model is great, but if it was fully exhaustive, the problem wouldn't be getting worse, which it is. Suicide rates are increasing, mental health rates are increasing. We have to do more. And the fact that there is a typo in the DSM, in the OCD section on the word delusional, summarizes my entire argument. That's the most awesome thing ever. For an OCD guy, I saw that and I'm like, someone's taking the piss. Someone's taking the piss. There's no way, that is straight out of the textbook that university gave me. We have to rethink things, because if it was working, we wouldn't be here. So, and sorry, I didn't mean to be rude before. I am cutting. I'm just on a roll. You get it, right? Yeah. So, I'm in the zone. The 5 things that I feel are contributing to the problem are, first and foremost, relying on supporters to hold all the weight. Instead of saying for experiences, you have accountability as much as you have permission to put your hand up and say, I'm not doing well. We need to move from are you okay to I'm not okay. At least balance it out. Not to be one or the other, but both. And Heart on My Sleeve is all about, I'm going through it, my shit, I need help, and I will drive this train. Second thing is, in particular pockets, awareness is not saturated. Schizophrenia and bipolar 1 in particular, where we need to start with awareness. But in instances like anxiety and depression, people hide behind awareness. They don't model behaviour. It's easier to post a photo to social media saying it ain't weak to speak than it is to come home and ask your roommate how they're doing. If we want to make a change in what is the global warming of mental health, i.e. it's too bloody late to raise awareness, we have to change shit now. You have to be the person that genuinely inquires and says, are you okay? Or be the person that says, hey, I believe in speaking up and asking for help. I'm not just going to tell people to do that when they're not doing well. I'm going to do that too. I'm going to have the courage to say, I'm modeling the behaviour and the beliefs, and I'm going to ask for help. We have to move from awareness to behaviour. Third thing is, we can't, especially in the workplace, can't have a mental health speaker come in once a year, like me, or put bananas and apples in the fruit bowl and be like, we have a wellbeing plan. No, you don't. It has to be a 365, 24/7 approach, baking mental health into every single level of the organisation and every single level of society and life. Mental health is life. It's the camera. It's the lens we see everything through. We have to approach it like a soccer team approaches the health of their athletes' legs. The team just doesn't run without it. Fourth, it's one thing to say speak up, but the level of education we're giving people on how to have these conversations is really low. 4 steps, listen, refer, that's all fine, But like, what does it mean to actually listen? So many people accidentally, through all these stories so far, have proven the point for me. They've said connection's been everything, and I wanted someone to listen more than I wanted them to solve it. Okay? So, but how do you sit in that space with someone? How do you sit in that ambiguity? How do you sit in not solving without feeling negligent? How do you sit in watching your own shit arise when someone else arises their stuff? What do you do there? We need to become more tactical in the level of conversation we're having in mental health. And finally, the professionals are damn important. If you're not a chiropractor, you don't try and crack someone's neck. Same goes with mental health. If you're not a psychiatrist or a psychologist, you don't try and deliver CBT. But that's not a black and white statement saying you just have to refer to them straight away either. There's a bunch of middle ground there where we can become better in the day-to-day, no pun intended, the heart of the conversation, and play a bigger role there in the day in and day out. It's not as simple as land and refer. It's land and live with someone in that moment. And most of all, more than anything, we have to be more real. We just have to. We have to connect with others. We have to remember what it's like to remove the mask. In Freud's definition, all mental illness is defenses. The absence of a mask, therefore, is health. And this is what it feels like to share. And then I'm done, I promise.
There were a couple of days where I was like doubting my ability to write some words down.
I thought about it for I think about 2 months or a month, and I was like, I really want to say something. I really want to speak up and share my story. I have people from work on Facebook, and I didn't know what guys would think of me if they were going to think I was damaged or something.
People were in shock when I shared this. That they had no idea that at any time in my life I had gone through mental health problems.
The second I did it, it's one of the most liberated I've ever felt in my whole entire life. I felt like I was on a roller coaster, but in like a good way. Like it wasn't scary, it was one of the best I've ever felt.
But at the end of the day, I was like, this is sort of, not a risk, but I can't hide who I am. I don't want to be fake. So I would just feel better telling everyone and sharing my story, and also helping other people share their story. And as soon as I did it, I felt like a weight lifted off my shoulders. Like it wasn't a secret anymore. I wasn't hiding it from anyone. Everyone knows, and everyone was so accepting of it.
I was sort of shudder to think what could have happened to me if I didn't have people around me giving that proper support and encouragement and showing empathy. So of course it's a duty for me to do the same thing. And maybe the fact that I see it as being like some kind of a wider societal obligation helps me feel more comfortable talking about my own story.
Everyone else felt while I was asleep. That's how I always felt every night. And I was alone on the couch again, and I was like, I'm just going to do it. And I did it, and I have felt stronger every day. And it's allowed me to connect back with myself through this movement to equal again. And I'm talking more, and I didn't think I'd ever step foot in a dance class again. People will tell me I look different now, but I actually look like I used to look. I look like myself.
People will admire and respect you more than they will judge you, because what you're doing takes a lot of courage, and it's it's a little bit scary, but once you can free yourself from that and become comfortable with it, it becomes less of a burden, it becomes easier every day.
So the take-home message there isn't go tell the world who you are. It's not blabber all your insecurities to as many people as you can to try and get sympathy on Facebook, by any means. The take-home message there, and those people may look like privileged white kids who just broke up with their exes, but really those people are going through bipolar 1, bipolar 2, like serious stuff, debilitating stuff. And what they have modeled is they're owning who they are, and they're wanting to connect with people in real ways. That's the take-home message. And I love the fact, this quote, because we've eradicated polio and we still don't know why it causes paralysis. And I think the same is true for mental health. It is so complex. that we may not need to understand the exact why. We just need to focus on what's working. And what I know works is authentic connection and realness. So let's do a bit more of that. Thank you.
Thanks, Mitch. That's very powerful. I think we've been talking about the mental health landscape and the confusion of it all and the multi-layered. And the word's been integration, but I wonder if the word needs to be connection. And connection with all parts of the system, connection to consumers, connection to carers. How do we make it a strong connection? I think that will be something that I'll be taking back. Thank you, Mitch. That was great. I'd just like to introduce our next speaker. Is Sarah Lambert, who's the Director of ACON Health. Sarah has an extensive experience working in mental health, disability and alcohol and other drug sectors in both clinical and community-based organisations. She trained as an occupational therapist with a Masters in Health Science, Drug and Alcohol and Management qualifications. She has a passion for peer and lived experience in supporting individuals and communities to realise their own capacity. She has worked on ACON for 5 years, on which she spent 4 years managing direct client services before stepping into the role of Director, which incorporates ACON's clinical client services, LGBTI health promotion, regional services and training programs. Please welcome Sarah.
Okay, it was a top act to follow, but I think some of the things hopefully I'm going to be sharing, like all of today, will be weaving and adding to that tapestry that we're experiencing, I guess. So, how do I get this to move? There we go. So I was asked to speak on LGBTIQ mental health needs and experiences, and it's a real privilege to do that. So thank you to the organisers. I'd first like to acknowledge the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nations on which we're meeting, and their elders past, present and emerging. So today I'm speaking to some members of the LGBTI communities, some of my family, which would be awesome. I also imagine I'm speaking to quite a few active allies, those who have been alongside us in the various struggles we've had, including the other year, the marriage equality. I also expect there may be some people who don't have as much exposure to our communities, and it's my hope today to share some of the vibrantness and the strengths of which we have. As we know, mental health and wellbeing is everyone's business. And in our movement towards improved mental health and wellbeing and living our best lives, we can learn from one another, and we also need to be mindful about not leaving anyone behind. And there is much talk of privilege in various forms. What I'm just going to touch on a little bit in sharing, I guess, the LGBTIQ community struggles and movements, is privilege doesn't just mean that you have some advantages that others don't. It just means you cannot truly understand their lived experiences. You're never going to be in the same position that they are, no matter what you do. But it's about acknowledging that, giving space for those people with those experiences, allowing them to step forward and lead, and offering them support on the matters that impact them, being guided by them. And we know that really well in the mental health sector. So I'm going to be sharing images as I talk, and then I'm going to be sharing quotes because I want my community to speak for themselves. And a vast amount of the LGBTIQ communities, including myself, have lived experiences with mental health. Our voices just aren't often identified as readily. So our community, so I'm talking about LGBTIQ, it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, sometimes you add on queer as well. But we're more than letters, we're really diverse. And each of these communities are as unique as the individuals and the lived experiences that we all have. And we're so fabulous that we have so many multiple amazing flags. We got all the colourful ones, I have to say. So today I'm going to speak of some of the experience of sexually and gender diverse people. You'll hear the alphabet soup a little bit, but I will acknowledge that there are variations within our communities and no individual group is the same. And so I'm going to not speak so much about the intersex communities because there isn't that much known about their experiences of mental health, and that's something we need to do more about and be better for. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to respect the Darlington Statement, which is their way of saying don't speak of us without us. And there's a wonderful image of that community that developed that Darlington Statement, and I really think people would love to see it. Okay. What we do know, however, is that for intersex people living in a world that is very binary, you're male and female, and that's where we divide everything, is actually really isolating and it's really hard. So we do know that they experience increased levels of distress. I don't expect you to see all these stats. I'm going to talk a little bit about them. But our communities experience a range of health disparities. And it comes from being part of a minority population. We're 3 more times likely to experience depression, 4 times more likely to experience anxiety, and 3.5 to 14 times higher rates of suicide. We have the highest rate of suicide of any population in New South Wales. And studies show that as much as 50% of our communities experienced suicidal thoughts in the previous month. We do not have the rates for other mental illnesses. However, we can assume that we're of community, that we'll be in there. However, maybe our experience of getting support and our experience of treatment services aren't so great. So perhaps we're not always getting the help that we need and that we're asking for. But why is this? It's actually because of minority stress. It's well shown in the research, and different groups have different forms of minority stress. Minority stress describes chronically high levels of stress faced by members of stigmatised minority groups. It's the feeling of being other or not knowing where you fit. And it can be a number of factors: poor social support, low socioeconomic status, but the most well understood are actually the interpersonal prejudices and discrimination experiences that people have. So this is one of the beautiful Bingay young men coming together and having a great time in our communities. So what we know is minority stress actually means we self-edit, we censor ourselves, we hold back. We find ourselves hiding who we're in relationships with. We find ourselves not often being acknowledged in different forums. I have certainly experienced sitting alongside my peers and knowing that there were wonderful queer women who had children that weren't acknowledged on Mother's Day. It's those things that in time really build up and add to that impact. It means we're weighing up the potential of discrimination, unwelcome commentaries, risk to personal safety, career impacts and societal isolation. And you add into that the fact that we're also, navigating our own mental health needs through it. I have a colleague, a wonderful, fierce woman, with trans experience, who said, you know how you wait on a train station late at night and you're a bit worried about your safety? Well, during the middle of the day, I can stand on that train station and worry someone might actually push me in front of that train. Now, they're ghastly experiences to think, but that's what people are living with. And I don't share that to certainly upset anyone. I just want to paint that picture, because I think unless you hear that from people, you don't understand where they're coming from. Here's one of my first quotes. For me, the worst thing about discrimination has been the way that I have, in the past, taken responsibility for it, thinking it was my job to stay out of the firing line. I was always trying to second guess what people were thinking and act accordingly to manage what I thought were their expectations. As a result, I faced little direct discrimination, but that has come at a great cost to my own happiness. This is a brilliant picture of trans and gender diverse communities in a photo shoot that we had at ACON, and oh gosh, they had fun. It was brilliant. And we know that these communities even have higher rates of stigma and discrimination, and they're the ones who are the 14 times higher to have risk of suicide. And you just have to look at the moment in the media, unfortunately, to see these beautiful people have become a political football. And that really does impact. Sadly, sometimes it doesn't take much harassment to severely impede on someone's self-confidence and self-worth. Even the smallest forms, such as a sneer, a funny face, or a rude remark, can have a lasting effect. Things like this have a way of staying ingrained in the back of your mind and can lead to lasting effects of depression and anxiety. We know that people with lived experience of mental illness face barriers accessing support needs and having needs met. And we all live, like everyone else, in a bit of a deficit in medical models of systems. This is a beautiful picture of Broken Hill Festival. Best drag experience you can go to, by the way. So, here's another quote about a negative experience. Rather than being provided with appropriate support, she was told by workers that her gender expression needed to be toned down, that she was inappropriate as opposed to her behaviour, and that she was putting herself at risk. Despite direction from senior staff and handover protocols, workers repeatedly refused to use the client's affirmed name and pronoun, choosing her birth name and masculine pronouns, robbing them of their identity. Our communities have a long history of being pathologised within health services, and I know that's something we can all relate to. It was in 1987 that homosexuality was actually removed from the DSM, but its legacy lives on. It means that instead of looking at other things that we might be coming with, including things like a broken arm, people automatically assume that it's our gender and our sexualities that are the big problem, and they need to be fixed. Trans and gender diverse people must rely on psychiatrists and medical specialists to access gender affirming healthcare and changes to their legal classification and identification. They have to jump through many hoops to be who they are. And our relationships and families have often been overlooked and discounted. But I have to say, marriage equality, we really felt celebrated. So marriage equality came a long way to address this, but we know there's still work to be done. We know positive health and access to responsive healthcare is a human right, something everyone deserves. And it's important that LGBTIQ people have a positive, supportive, non-judgmental experience, no matter which health service they need. We don't have to just go to the gay person down the road. It's hard to find them to begin with. But we want to go anywhere. We want to have a good relationship and connect and to feel understood. You often will have heard the phrase coming out. Well, we actually like the phrase inviting someone in. It reflects the choice that someone has in who, when, and what they share about themselves. And when someone shares aspects of their identity, it means that you have been a safe person to do that with, that they're confident that you'll be supportive of them. It's a real privilege. The concept of inviting people in is particularly supportive for young people as it shifts that overwhelming connotations of disclosure, that it's something dirty or secretive. There's some wonderful pictures of our family, of our relationships. Any connection is important to translate that feeling that someone is aware of you, your health, and what your healthcare needs are. This is simple, but so important. Now, I'm sure a lot of people have seen this before, or variations of it, yeah? Mental health and disability sector, this is our thing. And we know we need to go beyond treating everyone the same. And many of the recovery principles actually really apply for LGBTIQ people. It's never about us without us. It's about self-determination, empowerment, choice and control. It's about inviting people in and being at the table. It's about being treated as a whole person. I don't know how one can segment oneself as being GLBT person and have something important only happen to a part of them. I am me, and my sexuality and gender do not cause my mental health issues. But how society impacts us, treats us, impacts us. I don't need to be treated differently, but I need people to understand and get who I am. We need people to understand there's nothing wrong with being GLBT, that we are not different, we are normal, and we deserve to be treated as such. We need more understanding health services, both physical and mental health. Sydney Gay and Lesbian Choir, and they're beautiful singers, I have to say. Like many communities, we gain strength and pleasure from coming together and having that shared understanding. And this includes recognition of our diverse sexualities and gender. But it also means that's only just one thing that defines us. There's so much more to us as people. It's quite easy that we make assumptions based on appearance. We do that in life, don't we? All the time. For LGBTIQ people, this happens in lots of ways. Visible LGBTIQ people face further discrimination in areas of credibility with drug-seeking behaviours. Basically, a whole lot of assumptions on who we are based on our hair, dress, before any actual engagement happens. That's a quote from someone who shared it in a focus group. Sharing that, often doors shut or people make assumptions about what actually they're presenting with without actually hearing from that person. pronouns. Look, they stopped teaching grammar at school a long time ago. I was one of that generation that just didn't get it. So you hear pronouns, you're like, what the hell are they talking about? It means how we talk about ourselves in I, me, she, he, them, there. And what we say about assumptions, really, we know we make an ass of everyone, and this is some of the stuff that happens. But what happens when we show respect is that we're led by someone's example of how they recognise and identify, and that includes how we refer to them. So we don't want people getting tied up in this. I mean, we're humans, we're people, we've got names. But it just means it's ways that people express their identity, their gender identity, and it's also a way of conveying respect. So if you're able to, please use them. And don't get fear, don't let fear of making a mistake get in the way either. Like everything in life. Apologise, acknowledge, learn, move on. But the effort has been appreciated. People with disabilities in the Mardi Gras March. 22.6% of LGBTIQ people aged over 16 identify as having a disability. And we know all too commonly people with disabilities are not seen as sexual beings or desiring relationships. And this really plays out for this group in our communities. People with disabilities also face prejudices which mirror the general population. I'd like to think it's something that we're improving on, but we too also need to learn to walk the talk that we make. We are part of the community. We see our disability and sexuality as key parts of our identities. It's important to highlight that yes, we have a disability and may do things different to the norm, but we are here, we are queer, and we're not going to be ignored anymore. We need to remember that there are parts of the community, like people who are LGBTI and have a disability, that already feel ashamed, scared, and really somewhat ignored. There's diversity in all our community. I love that of my communities especially because we really see it, but it's wherever we are. Minorities within minorities, and for some cultural and ethnic groups, for LGBTQ people, we're viewed quite differently. And it can mean, particularly from people from non-Western cultures, sometimes that understanding of their identities remains back how it was in their countries of origin, even though country of origin might have moved on. It also means that confidentiality can sometimes be particularly important for those of us who come from other backgrounds. We all compartmentalise parts of ourselves, we choose who we share what for. Part of that's around safety, and it's just being mindful that does play out. They're the young gay Asian men's group. I feel like a lot of people don't understand the cultural issues facing LGBTI plus people of colour. They don't understand family dynamics and how those play a role in mental health issues and all social relationships. Without understanding that, doing anything else, including treatment, is hard. Some cultures have always embraced diversity, Aboriginal communities too. When making the decision to come out, we often feel a sense of isolation and disconnection of country we identify with and the land and location we identify our kinship, often resulting in drug and alcohol dependency to suppress our feelings connected to the whole coming out process. There is a mental challenge to balance culture, connection to land, and sexuality and acceptance within our kinships. Sister girls and brother boys, terms used for transgender Aboriginal community members, have always been around, but it was with colonialisation and the inception of Western religions that actually have shifted that understanding, and some of that's been lost. For health services, we routinely ask demographic questions. Hey, we all fill out many forms, yeah? We tick the boxes, we think, what do we need to answer in this question? For us, often we don't see ourselves. Sometimes we don't see any other option but male-female, and no other option except married or not married. Though actually that's shifting for us now. We can actually write in that, which is pretty cool. And it's the same though as asking what someone's background is, or whether they're an Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander. The Sachs Institute, which surveyed people 65 years and up, older Australians, who you think might be a bit more conservative, had no problem with being asked that question. They actually got a lot more insulted, which most of us would be, about what are your finances? So really most people don't mind. They tick the box that's appropriate for them. But when you ask that question, it's not about the people who might be offended. You're actually doing it for the people who can't see themselves. and it's taking that extra step, remember, about equity. It also means then services can actually be designed to meet our needs rather than trying to fit us in a box. Can I be myself and go to any service and be safe? That's a hard thing. We all face that one. I don't feel safe in using mainstream services as a queer person. I've experienced judgment and done disproportionate educating to psychologists in the past. I can't do that during a time of crisis. That's just not safe for my mental health. When we do sit with mental health professionals, often half the appointment's spent just explaining who we are, our relationship, and sometimes making sense of, well, why have we been with men, women, and, you know, had different relationships. It's exhausting. It's a beautiful picture of a breast reveal event for breast cancer awareness with women in Blue Mountains. I've got a few more tips for service providers who are in the room. I'm sorry. I always tick these ones off. Please review your client forms so we can write ourselves in. It can mean the difference between someone actually engaging or putting down that form and walking out the door. We need policies and procedures that are non-judgmental, that convey everyone is welcome, and if there is any prejudice in services that we access, whether it's from staff or clients or community members, that we know will be looked after. And we love a good rainbow. I'm hoping there's going to be some rainbows on that poster at the back. I don't see any yet, but they'll come. Yeah? Please use those symbols. We walk around looking for them. We love to spot a rainbow. It's like the gaydars really on. So LGBTQ resources, images of diverse people, relationships and families are all what we look for when we're seeing if this is a safe place to be, if it's a place we want to spend time, if it's a place where we want to make connection. Seeing health professionals in general is often a scary and intimidating experience for trans folk. I've learnt the hard way that being a medical professional doesn't make someone knowledgeable about trans issues. If I wanted some kind of mental health professional in the future, I'd only see one that had previous experience to trans issues so I wouldn't have to educate them and I wouldn't feel violated. A lot of questions get asked of trans people that are just really, really insensitive. That means as health professionals we need to do the extra thing and pick up the phone and check a service is okay, check they're going to have a good experience, that we trust where we're sending people. Dykes on bikes, these lead the Mardi Gras, and they're actually born out of keeping our gay men safe when they were being abused on the street. Having to educate health workers is an all too familiar experience. It really gets in the way of the support that we need. It takes up so much time and so much energy. Support workers, please, by training your workforce if you're a service provider or if you're a health worker. Give the workers the skills, knowledge, confidence that improves outcomes for our communities. It's often our discomfort that stops us from relating to one another, but we're all humans. I'm getting the wrap up, that's okay. We'll get there. This is just talking about please find gay-friendly providers. There are some around. I'm going to leave some cards on the front desk, so if anyone wants to make contact with me, I can certainly link you in, and ACON's always happy to let you know. It's word of mouth that we find our people, our peers, if that's what we feel we need. Sometimes, like I said, it just means doing a little bit of extra work. These are the wonderful older community members having a dance. And isolation. I find that I hide. I don't open up to people as much as I want to be. Being told that there is something fundamentally wrong with you is a hard thing to deal with. I find I don't fit in with others, that I'm mostly an insider. This is the rugby team, it's brilliant. So our communities actually come together a lot like every other community. We have our own sporting teams, we have our own interest groups, we have a choir, we have community events and venues, and we really want you to come along and enjoy them with us. We love to see people come and celebrate with us. I'm just going to finish with that we are a resilient community. Unfortunately, I've shared more of the heartbreaking stuff, but we're amazingly strong and we look after one another. I feel like there's a sense of stoicism in the queer community. It's not so bad, I'm okay, it's fine. And so much more of my defence mechanisms is around stuff like this, avoidance, and it really took me by surprise how hard I was hit. Maybe that's why the support services didn't really enter my mind. For me, it's my peers, my chosen family that I turn to. We help each other. But I know we also need to learn to actually ask for the help. This is our football team, soccer team. So our communities are resilient. We have a long history, born out of the times when homosexuality was illegal, when the HIV epidemic saw our communities coming together because health professionals were afraid they'd catch it from us. And we've actually done great stuff as we go along, and there's so much potential. So please, thank you for listening, and keep ACON in mind for our own support services. And please come on the journey with us. We all are better off when we embrace diversity. And we are vibrant, fabulously diverse people, and I hope I've given you just a little taste of what you can experience if you come along to things like Mardi Gras. So thank you very much.
Thank you. I mean, as we probably heard by now, it's hard enough sitting in a mental health family. I think to be further marginalised makes things twice as difficult. So a really important discussion around how we bring equality across the board. So I'd like to introduce now Judy Nicholas. She's a carer advocate. Having worked in the mental health system for over 20 years, she has a professional background as a trained nurse in the aged care sector. Judy's been able to utilise her knowledge and skills she gained from advocating in the aged care system and adapt this to the areas of health, particularly mental health. Judy uses the lived experiences of her family members, including her own, to support and educate other carers and families of those living with mental illness.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm next. I married a man who had obsessive compulsive disorder in 1969, and when I sent him to a psychoanalyst to get fixed, I found that I had OCD as well. Interesting times. Mental illness changed me and my family forever. We paid heavily as we have swung from the depths of despair, that is in grief and loss, fear and anger, to hope, optimism and acceptance. I'll now share the intense challenges and the few joys which have resulted in our survival about my two girls, because sadly they have mental illness. They went to university and, funnily enough, they smoked pot in the bars, and after a couple of years they developed mental psychosis. Sadly for Leanne, the older one, she also was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So we've had an interesting 25 years since then. Leanne was hospitalised with suicide ideation the day I flew out of the country going on holiday. So it was a wonderful week's holiday away while I worried myself sick. Then she joined the RIDE Mental Health Service team, which was absolutely fantastic, and we had the most wonderful mentor called Paula Hanlon, who was one of the first consumer advocates in this country, and she persuaded Leanne to present at a FEMS conference because Leanne had won many prizes in speech and drama. She loved this, she did very well at it, and I thought, wow, this is great. I could do this too. And so I joined her and we became mother and daughter speakers, presenters. And we learned our skills here at One Door. Jane Randall ran the Remind course, and we were the first ones to start it off. And we've been doing it ever since. We really love it. sharing our story, and that's what I'm doing here today. But very sadly, Leanne had experiences with medication. She had 2 medications that interacted, and badly, that is, and she was hospitalised with a blood pressure of 60 systolic. So that was very low. After 3 days in emergency and having intravenous, it came up to 90, so that was pretty good, eh? Anyway, after that, she kept going from bad to worse. Very sadly, the next medication she was on caused excessive prolactin, and she had prolactin in her bloodstream that were 3,000 units in excess. As they stopped that medication straight away, it came back to 146 units. In the meantime, she had a pituitary tumour called a prolactin tumour. That meant hospitalisation for 2 years, and she was very institutionalised by the end of 2 years. And sadly, her hallucinations and delusions began then. The hallucinations were that food was poisoned and she couldn't eat properly. She lost 2 stone in weight. She went down to 5 stone. And the delusions were mainly royalty. And there is not one medication she's been on since for 20 years has eliminated those symptoms. She was later hospitalised on the next medication with neuroleptic malignant syndrome and cardiac effusion. So she has a wonderful heart condition that causes her to have edema of the hands and feet, and a great risk of dying much earlier than most people. After that hospitalisation, she went on another medication and managed to have kidney dysfunction, incontinence, and a cyst on the kidney. She was hospitalised again for another full year. She had dystonia at one stage in that hospitalisation and was rushed to a normal hospital on oxygen because she had spasm in the neck and breathing passages and couldn't breathe. Thyroid problems were also affected. She came home for a short time, but very soon had side effects again, and this time they decided to send her to Orange, to Bloomfield Hospital. She was out there for 1 year. I used to drive out there, the good 4-hour drive, and I'd arrive at the door and her mental condition just said, "You can go, you're not my mother, you killed my mother, and you're just pretending to be my mother." So it's a lovely 4-hour drive back after that. I have to say that I'm really grateful at the moment because there have been a lot of improvements in the last 9 years. And in the last 2 years, she's had NDIS, and that has been a saviour. We have one door dietitian here, Michelle Sue, and she has for 1 year worked so hard on Leanne that many of those hallucinations about food have gone. And now instead of eating what I call rubbish, she now prepares her own salads and eats beautifully. I'm very, very grateful. But I'm going to tell you another little story about NDIS. Only this week I went to a candidates forum for this election. And I thought, wow, this is a great opportunity. So I stood up and I asked the candidate, what have you done with the $1.6 billion of NDIS money? Was that just to prop up your budget? Because I've lost $10,000 from both my girls, and not only that, most of their friends don't even get NDIS. He was so angry with me, he said, that was a cheap shot. I got a good answer, didn't I? I'll now go on to tell you about my other daughter, Karen. She was also affected at university with psychosis and developed obsessive compulsive disorder. However, it's very interesting with obsessive compulsive disorder because that forced her to get honours in her degree. Then she went off and worked for 10 years in very high profile positions, one in the government, and she did speech writing for politicians. And we were invited into the Parliament in Sydney, and we could sit there and hear Karen's speech. It was beautiful. And the politician would come out and say, she's just fantastic. I hardly have to change her speeches. She knows exactly what I would write. However, very stressful job, and what happened? Relapse. She'd been on antidepressants. The side effects to the antidepressants were dystonia. Now that is a muscular spasm, and it caused her to fall over, and she couldn't get up. So she would wear an alarm around her neck. She lives in a little granny flat of my mother's in the backyard, so I would have to go and pick her up. The spasm also caused a spasm in her throat, so she couldn't swallow food. I had to puree her food. Then she became so weak that she couldn't lift the spoon to her mouth, and I would feed her. And as a result of that, she lost a lot of weight. She dropped to 28 kilos. She had visual disturbances, couldn't watch television. She had a horrible auditory condition that she couldn't stand to hear the children next door play. She couldn't stand the birds. She couldn't stand the noise from television or music. We had to double glaze the flat. She wanted to die. I don't blame her. I didn't help her, but I didn't help her to live either. The team rushed her to hospital on that 28 kilos, and she was fed intravenously, and after 3 months she returned home at 46 kilos. That was several years ago now, so she's still not a great deal better. However, I'm very grateful for the NDIS because they come in 5 hours a day. Can you believe that? Am I lucky? They shower her, they dress her, they cook her meals, they prepare her meals, clean her flat, take her shopping, and generally just lift her self-esteem, and she's just surviving. So it's not a very good story, I must say. I'm sorry, a very negative story about mental illness. However, I'm going to finish by saying this little spiel. I have a spiritual practice, and it drives me to focus on positivity, acceptance, and not why me. Letting go of anger, there's plenty of that comes, but you've got to learn to let it go. Resentment, and these have been essential to survive. I've absorbed myself in advocacy. I absolutely love it. Getting on to those politicians, I write letters all the time. They get printed in the Herald and in the local paper, and that gives me great joy because that's getting out to a lot of people to tell them how hard it is to be a carer and a consumer in the mental health system. We continue to make all these efforts, making the most of what life throws at us, trying to lead fulfilling lives and knowing that this hardship has made us all strong and resilient.
I don't really know what to say. Yeah, it's quite unbelievable. I mean, I hear people's stories for a living, and we've had two today that have been quite extraordinary. Yeah, I just want to say thank you for your strength and your courage, and one day I will sit down with God and ask Him why the fuck this shit happens. Sorry to be so crass, but
Karma. Have you heard of karma?
well, let's not unpack that. We could be here for a long time, but I do want to say that you're an absolute warrior, and as is your family, and you deserve the world, and so, yeah, thank you. Dr. Anne-Marie Bickerton is next, a senior psychiatrist who's recently established the Caring with Families program at the Hills Clinic. This program builds on Anne-Marie's extensive experience and interest in working with families of people living with mental illness. The program takes a whole-of-family approach to mental health challenges across the lifespan. Anne-Marie trained as a doctor and psychiatrist at Royal Prince Alfred before going on to complete specialist training in child, adolescent and family psychiatry at a hospital in London. You've developed a national reputation for your work developing family-friendly adult mental health services across New South Wales. More recently, Anne-Marie has worked with the statewide Family and Carer mental health program on the Staying Connected with When Emotions Run High initiative for families, carers and friends. A lot of great stuff. Thank you and welcome.
Thanks so much. I was just thinking I've learned a lot, but by God, I haven't learned to work with damn computers. Lovely to be here today. I especially want to thank Kathy Borman. Kathy's been a wonderful leader for us in New South Wales Health. It broke my heart when she left New South Wales Health, but she's gone on to Parramatta Mission Uniting Care and now to lead this organisation. So yeah, it's wonderful to be here, and thank you already. I've only been here since the lunch break, but to the inspirational speakers. I speak fast. New South Wales Health has taught me, because usually you do 10 jobs in one, and I've got to speak real fast or Louise will probably come and knock me off the stage. And Kathy and I know each other well, so she might knock me off too. But I'm going to speak very briefly about, I guess, something that Judy's speech really highlighted, that families and carers are our key resources. They're our lighthouses in a consumer or anyone's recovery. And I'm very passionate about actually health services now positioning themselves to create lighthouses rather than become them, because we're not too damn good. A lighthouse versus a mother or a lover or a family member is professionals pretty quickly snuff out. And I think Judy highlighted again just how enduring that relationship is. I'm going to briefly touch on a wonderful initiative I've been part of now for, I think we're in our 8th year, Staying Connected When Emotions Run High. Just draw quickly some of the key points out of that, hopefully get some of you curious. There's probably a couple of people who've been, there's some people who've been here, but get curious about maybe coming to one of our workshops, and we're very grateful that One Door is actually going to fund some. There's workshops for professionals and families. So I'm going to briefly go through this and show you a little bit of footage to hopefully keep you awake. Today was about thought leaders, and I think a really incredible thought leader was Dr. Murray Bowen. Dr. Murray Bowen back in the 50s, at a time when Freudian theory reigned supreme, when individual approaches reigned supreme, and when if a psychiatrist saw a family, at least they were seen as quirky, at worst they were taken for a medical legal case. So things were different then. He actually got really interested in family, and he, in fact, this will blow your mind, admitted whole families for a year. Now we're lucky to admit one person for a day, but and he watched them, and he was curious in his team, and he came up with Bowen Family Systems theory. And this is the theory that underpins really the Staying Connected. It's the theory really of, this is familiar to all of you. It's the wisdom of the connectedness, of what belongs between us. It was great to hear Mitch talk about connection as well, but there is a whole lot that happens between us because we're not individuals, we're a herd species. And it's our herdness that's so important. And I think adages like things like a mother's only as happy as her unhappiest child. It's the wisdom of the ages, and yet we've often not tapped into that in mental health. So the theory that the staying connected, sorry, I've left out a very important person, she'll somehow beam down on me. My colleague who wrote this program with me is Tony Garrity, and I'm extremely proud of her because also she's just recently been named one of our Deputy Mental Health Commissioners, and we've had the privilege through the Staying Connected to meet over 4,000 families, and their voices now Tony will be taking to the Commission, so she's I'm presenting on both our behalves today. So what are the core concepts? Humans are a relational species. Each person's behaviour impacts the other. Humans under stress will predictably adapt to each other in certain ways. The dances, but that's what we're going to see in a minute, some of the dances. Such dances, whilst based on good intent, and this is what's often so hard, and we're training professionals to say, the dance you might briefly see, the intent may be good, they might provide short-term relief of some sort of distress and have longer-term implications for functioning. The theory behind the staying connected is about the herd, it's normalising, it is not judgmental, but it does honour that humans under distress will behave very differently because their lives, I always say, start being run from here, not here. And it really is a challenge, understandable but a challenge when life gets run that way. I guess it's pretty obvious what a lighthouse is, but it's a clear, predictable and consistent guide, standing firmly on safe ground to guide one to safety. When the seas are roughest, a lighthouse stands firm, doesn't wade into the water to rescue or run away, but it provides stability and hope to those struggling to make the shore. And this is what we're asking our families, carers, as well as all our other community, I guess, to be lighthouses up and down the shore, this beautiful shore of ours, but a shore that is so troubled in so many ways, people. Let me briefly show you some of this in graph form, but I think you'll then see the dance, which will bring it alive. What I think we've already highlighted the challenges in classification. It was nice seeing the DSM-5 up, but it is really problematic. We are confusing mental health, and everyone else is confused, and I don't think we're being honest about the level of confusion we currently have. The staying connected, you'll hear on the DVD in a minute, we talk a bit about personality disorder. That's where our funding came from, so we use that. But really it's just about a member of the herd stirred up. And there's lots of different names for different things, but what we think about is, we're all surfers of some sort, and I've already been, heard about the things that Mitch said he achieved and Judy's daughter. They're incredible surfers, but something went going on that actually got them to break point. But I think always connecting with people we are involved in helping as a competent surfer who falls off away, rather than seeing them as losing sight of their competence, because it's the recovery, their strength that's so remarkable. So we look at the waves, and blue waves are those waves we all sort of manage to surf and grow ourselves to surf. But occasionally, and maybe more in our current first world, so fraught with change and stress, as well as so much privilege, people are getting hit by red waves. They're tsunami-like waves. They're waves too big for that person at that time to surf. And when they hit that, they will start popping out symptoms, and they will look for a quick fix. And there's plenty of quick fixes out there. That's it. That's how I think mostly about symptoms that we see in people. It's some sort of sense of overload. They were carrying something heavy. Eventually, everyone will have a break point. And I think, unfortunately, for mental health professionals, we meet people very briefly, and we often don't have the privilege of realising, wow, this multi-generation of people have had pretty amazing. Look what they've carried. It's hard to see that in that quick connection we often have. Just briefly, there's so much more about the brain. I've heard Dan Siegel mention, and we're learning so much more about the brain. In the Staying Connected, we just talk about really simple, big evolved brain, your supercomputer, the bit you want to run your life if you can, and then we talk about the primitive brain, deep in the brain, essential for survival, but problematic if you're trying to run your life on it. So the evolved brain works best in calm, hopefully when you're in a setting like this, but the primitive brain's going to get activated by a perceived threat. Now this is where families start getting challenged, because nothing will stress you more than those you love stirred up. So, just even, simple things that anyone's had a kindy child do their first project, you can really go nuts over that one. It's real. It's hard to get rational with your own lot, the people you love most. If the primitive brain activates, all you can do, rather than use this incredible wisdom, IQ, maturity, all that stuff up here, you can only fight, flight, submit, freeze and fix it. And by golly, aren't we good at fighting on this planet? So you start sort of looking at a planet of people often stuck in fight. It's primitive, it's not good or bad. The thing I like about the Bowen theory is not good or bad, it just is. All right, so if you're going to help someone then, you're going to have to probably go from contagious distress to contagious calm and start managing yourself. So, what you're going to see in a minute is a gorgeous young woman called Mandy. They're fictional characters, she's fictional characters. And she gets on a wave of distress too big for her. And what happens is she's a primate, she's a mammal, she's a baby, so guess who catches it first? Mum. If her mother hadn't got upset by her distress, that girl would not be gorgeous as she is. She would have died in a couple of days. Our babies are the most helpless babies. So mummy gets distressed and then, she's in primitive as well. We didn't have the money to film anyone else in the family, but by golly, if they were around, they all would have gone off as well. The dad, an uncle, an aunt, and a partner. The pets are going off. I have some fun talking with this stuff with families when we can stand back from it. We've got stories of dog cats, but the best story was a parakeet that went berserk in the midst of it all. So unfortunately, the people you're closest to, that love you, are most sensitive to you, and inadvertently, look what happens, they pour fuel on the fire. Not bad or good, it's instinct, because they've activated into primitive. So that's what will come naturally. So that's what I hear families talking about constantly. It's certainly what Tony and I constantly do with our people. We usually say we're better with people we see in our professional life because we like them, don't love them. If I love you, by golly, I'm a problem to you. But I'm working on it. Okay. And my kids, lucky they're not here because I'd tell you that. All right, this is what you're going to see. You're going to see 3 dances in a minute. The fear and worry dances. A loving mum, lose it. In a fear and worry dance, is too bossy, too busy, too kind. You'll see her. And then in primitive, and then you're going to actually see her get into what we call a good enough lighthouse dance. And with that, her gorgeous Mandy is going to be distressed, but she's going to hold steady. She's going to hold on to her thinking. She's going to have a big evolved brain in the lighthouse, and you're going to see something look very different. And because the mother has been engaged as the key member of the treating team, the mother's been trained, she's been coached. When things go bad, the mother can lighthouse her daughter like no one else and be a remarkable tranquilizer. It sounds easy, it's possible. Tony and I have stories of people telling us this stuff. It's a hell of a workout because you love someone so much. This is what we're wanting to engage carers for. So I'm now going to give you a quick run of the DVD. Obviously people who come to a workshop do a lot of work around it, but I just want you to have a look at this. And I'm hoping Jamie Lee has put it together. Add the video clip here. Go again. No. Thank you. It's always good to have someone young assist and who appear helpful.
I don't think young correlates with good outcomes here, but
It will. Just as long as I'm assuming it's in here somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, it might be my last slide. So.
Yes.
So you're going to fix this, not me.
Okay, so that's not. They're not my. Oh, okay. Apologies, everyone. I didn't integrate it all. It was just too much to. Okay, we go to mine.
Where's yours going?
Sorry, guys. It goes. So that must be that we need to get to the next. Oh, here we go. Oh, it's video. There we go. That last one was a little. It's hard now. It's hard.
On the screen's not working. Mitch?
We will begin with a series of scenarios we call 4 carer dances. These interactions can happen in all relationships, but especially for carers of someone with a personality disorder. Let's now meet Mandy and Jill, who will demonstrate the 4 carer dances. Mandy is a 24-year-old university student with a long-standing history of emotional and relationship challenges. She was diagnosed with a personality disorder at 19. Jill is a 47-year-old personal assistant. She is Mandy's mum and her primary carer. Their characters are based on the everyday struggles of families we have worked with. In the 4 carer dancers scenes, you will see how Jill's different approaches impact on Mandy's ability to manage her distress.
Where are you?
Mum, it's Lucy. She's cancelled. Emma,
Where are you?
I told you this morning, I'm at the cinemas. The film starts in 20 minutes. I need you to come here now.
You haven't already bought the tickets.
I had to.
How many times have I told you about wasting money? I told you that Lucy was unreliable.
I can't believe you went and bought those tickets again. Just shut up, Mum. You're always criticising me. Just come up here.
I criticise you because you deserve it. I try to teach you, but you just never listen. Now you take that ticket back to the salesperson and you return it. Otherwise, call Lucy and get her to pay.
I'll just stop
You've
talking.
wasted our money. Just throw it away. Yet again.
How
How do you think I tried to tell
You
you?
never listen.
Just
Who is it? Mum, it's Lucy. She's cancelled. And I've already bought our tickets. I need you to come here now.
I've had such a terrible day. The other secretary
Mum, you're not
called
listening
in
to me.
I
I
had
need
to do
you.
all of her work. And now she's called in and she needs another 3 days off.
Mum,
I think she's going off to Fiji with her new boyfriend. And now I've got to do all her work as well. I'm already so busy.
Lucy hates me.
Thank God I've got this dinner under Pat. She's always good for a laugh. I know we'll be shouting Chardonnay tonight. Oh, God, it's nearly 6 o'clock. I'm sorry, darling. I've got to go. Bye. Darling? Are you okay? Are you still at the movies? Is everything all right?
Mum, it's Lucy. She's cancelled. And I've already bought our tickets. Just let me down, Mum.
Oh, I'm so sorry. When I knew you were going to the movies with Lucy, I was worried she'd stand you up. I'll be there straight away.
Mum, you're not listening. It's not your fault. I'm just upset about
I'll just
Lucy.
call Auntie Pat and I'll tell her that I can't make it out for dinner. It's all my fault.
Mum, it's not your fault. I don't want you here.
Always letting me down.
Oh, you make me so angry. You never listen. Just forget about it.
Hello?
Mum, it's Lucy. She's cancelled. And I've already bought our tickets.
Oh, hello, darling. You sound upset. Are you still going to go and see a film tonight?
Well, that's the problem. Lucy cancelled and I've already paid for the tickets.
Oh, that is disappointing.
I'm angry because she's done this before. I don't trust her. I feel like everyone hates me. Please, can you come to the movies with me?
I can hear you're upset, but you and Lucy have had your ups and downs, and you've told me what a good friend she's been to you.
She has been a good friend. I'm just disappointed. Can you please come with me?
Mandy, it's Tuesday night. You know that's when I go down to the club with Auntie Pat and have dinner. You're welcome to join us.
But I've already paid for the tickets.
Well, you've still got time to make the best decision for yourself. How about you get back to me in 10 minutes and tell me what you'd like to do?
Mum, I still want to see the film. I think I'll ask them to refund one of my tickets and I'll just go in anyway.
That's a great idea, Mandy. That's a great plan. Well, you enjoy the film and I'll see you when you get home tonight.
Oh, this is meant to stop now. Stop it. We will begin with a series of scenarios. Right. I'm guessing for many of you who live around people, you very frequently do those sort of dances. What we highlight is that those first 3 dances are the fear and worry dances. They're the primitive brain dances. And if you love someone, you'll do that dance. Now let me see if I can get this to work. Okay, so let me just briefly. So we spend quite a bit of time in the workshop looking at unpacking those dances, And of course, we talk about them as the carer clinician dancers. Anyone who's connected with someone who means a lot to them and who gets anxious will go into those dances. They're not about mental illness. Just finally wanted to say we train people in, I think I've got there, the 5 strategies: care for self, to care for others. Thanks. So, you know, what you saw the mum do is she cared for self to care for others. Our carers forget, in the demands of caring, you don't suddenly get extra hours in your day, and usually what people tell us is, I put myself to the bottom of the pile. And I've had families that have said, you know what, if I was out at sea and you're in the light, you're like a match, I can't see you. We really need people to remind carers to engage with them, but say, please look after yourself, get some light in the lighthouse. Then, from a position of calm, be contagious with calm. Think about drawing your line in the sand. It's a really personal thing. Too quickly, professionals are often saying to carers, do this, do that. It's a personal journey. Sit with them and let them think about the consequences. I think Mitch highlighted this: listen, listen, listen with your heart, with compassion, with generosity, but try not to fix. Easier said than done, and I don't know about other mothers in the room, but it's not impossible, but I'm trying. And safety plan, like a fire drill. A lot of the workshop after this part goes into really looking at, let's think together at a time of calm, get the lighthouses ready so they can plan like a fire drill to be a resource to someone in distress. And this mother really does it, and families I've worked with are the most remarkable safety resources to help someone coming into a storm make it to shore, often for many years. Finally, if you're interested, I'll leave some flyers around. If you Google Staying Connected When Emotions Are on High, I think we've got about, I can't think, 20 maybe workshops to come the rest of the year, maybe not that many, but quite a lot, 15 or so. Our families and carers are welcome to come anywhere across the state. They're hosted by NGO partners. No one's charging, and you'll be welcome wherever you come. Our professionals have to pay. It's not a dear fee. If you're interested in learning more about Murray Bowen, go onto the Family Systems Institute site. We've got a conference coming up. Thank you, everyone. And again, I think what I wanted to end saying is our lighthouses have, our carers have something, families have something professionals don't have. They have love, and by golly, it keeps you going and is enduring. So thank you, and best wishes.
Thank you for being here. I love that metaphor. Lighthouse is a great metaphor. Yeah. And the role play made it very real, and I think we can see ourselves in all the 4 carers, and hopefully we stay on the 4th one, which is possible.
Once in a while.
All right, I think we're just gonna. I'm under instruction to everyone stand up for a sec. Just check it out real quick, because we've been sitting down for a long time. I know everyone's like, oh, we have to stand up. Check it out, getting ready. We're on the home stretch now. And we are going to be led into our last part of the relay. Everyone sit down when they feel comfortable. With Dr. Stephen King. So Dr. Stephen King joined the Productivity Commission as Commissioner in July 2016. He was previously Professor of Economics at Monash University in Melbourne, where he held the position Dean of Faculty of Business and Economics. Prior to joining Monash, Stephen was a member of the ACCC, where he chaired the Mergers Review Committee. Stephen's main areas of expertise are in microeconomic theory, competition economics, regulation, and industrial organisation. Stephen's research has been published widely, including articles in major international economic journals, a member of the Academy of Social Sciences in Australia, a lay member of the High Court of New Zealand, a member of the review panel considering pharmacy remuneration and regulation, and is currently leading the Productivity Commission inquiry into mental health. What a man, Dr. Stephen King.
Thanks for the great introduction, Mitch. And can I thank One Door? And can I particularly, I've been here, I came about halfway through the morning, and can I just say a huge thank you to the speakers that I've heard today, because I've heard from some extraordinary people, and thank you so much for sharing. What I'd like to do is just spend about 15 minutes, we're running a little bit late, so I'd like to spend about 15 minutes saying where we're up to in our inquiry. Really, we're still, we sort of feel like we've got a handle on some of the problems. I'm not going to try and present all of the issues that we've come across, but you'll notice that I'm still really asking questions. We haven't reached conclusions yet. We've got a lot of work to go before we can reach conclusions. I guess the first part though, some of you are probably asking, why would you have a mental health inquiry given to the Productivity Commission? So the Productivity Commission is a group of pointy-headed economists. So why would you want us to look at the mental health system? The starting point is that we're not doing a clinical inquiry. There's been clinical inquiries over the years. What we're doing is an inquiry from quite a different focus. So what we want to do is to look at the mental health system, to try and come up with recommendations to improve that system and to estimate the economic cost to society, both the economic and social cost to society of mental ill health. Now that's the cost to consumers, to carers, to families and to society more broadly. So our inquiry is going to have a wide scope. It goes beyond clinical treatment and even beyond health. So we're looking at a range of areas that include the psychosocial determinants of health, such as housing, education, the workplace, and the justice system. So why do you want pointy-headed economists looking at the mental health system? Because we're not clinicians, but we are really good at system design, thinking about incentives, at looking at the measurement of outcomes, and taking a consumer-centred focus. And it's sort of odd as an outsider coming into an area of health like this, when people say, oh, we need a consumer-centred health system. From an economist's perspective, it makes no sense to have anything but a consumer-centred health system. Because the value of a health system is the benefits that it provides to the consumers and to the carers and their families. A clinician-centred health system just makes no sense. That's our bias, but that's where we're coming from. Now, what's the timeline for our inquiry? So we started in November last year. We'll be providing our final report to the Federal Treasurer around the end of May next year. We'll be coming out with our draft report around November. In between times, we've got a team of around 20. Now, I've checked with people at the Commission. The team that we've got on this inquiry is actually the largest team the Productivity Commission has had, certainly in the last few years, as long as anyone can remember, because this is a huge area. We've already had more than 200 meetings with stakeholders, including government, health experts, clinicians, and most importantly, consumers and carers. And we're still having meetings. We've covered a wide area of Australia. We've got more than 500 submissions and comments. I suspect many of you in this room have given us submissions and comments. Some of us, so those telling your story. Now at the moment we're working towards that draft report. As you'll see, we've got lots of questions. I hope you'll help us get to the answers. So what are the areas of concern? I want to touch on just a few. I'm not going to try and be comprehensive. First area of concern, as an outsider coming in to this area of a health system, it is fragmented. It's much more fragmented than other areas that we've seen, even within the health system. What do we mean by that? Let's start off with fragmentation of the services. Let me give an example. So the Better Access program is funded through the MBS. It provides up to 10 sessions of cognitive behavioural therapy for people with mild mental illness such as mild anxiety or depression. That's formally what it's meant to do. I've talked with many clinicians and what it's formally meant to be doing and what it's actually doing seem to be two different things. Now, even within the scope, even within that mild anxiety and depression, it's about 2 million people a year. Allied health professionals see a sizable proportion of those people through the Better Access program. And for people with mild anxiety and depression, if they get appropriate treatment in a timely fashion, then recovery rates are excellent. But if they don't get that timely treatment, if it's not available, then some people with mild mental illness will not recover, they will get worse. So what do we find under Better Access? We find the Better Access program hasn't been properly evaluated. It appears to be delivering in some parts of Australia. But for example, if you go out to rural and regional areas of Australia, there simply aren't the allied health professionals there to provide the services. So you look out in parts of Australia where the relevant treatment is simply not accessible. If you live in the leafy suburbs of Sydney and Melbourne, you can access treatment, but in many other parts of Australia you can't. In my view, that's just not good enough. What other forms of fragmentation of service are there? Sometimes the service that's available is a long way away from what the preferred or appropriate service is. Let me give an example that some of you in this room unfortunately will be familiar with. Emergency departments in public hospitals. When things go wrong, when someone with particularly a severe mental illness has a bad day, they can sometimes end up with the police, with the emergency department. In an emergency department, I've yet to find anyone who thinks that's a good place to be. Now, some hospitals are experimenting with diversionary programs and trying to move people with mental health issues out of emergency departments into a safe place where they can stabilise. But again, across Australia, the fragmentation means that you've got best practice some places, but you've got very bad practice elsewhere. And we have heard from consumers who have told us about being in emergency departments and being told, just sit there and shut up because we deal with real sick people, not you. And that is not good enough. Third area of fragmentation. People sometimes fall through gaps in the system. I had never heard the term missing middle before I got involved in this inquiry. But I think I sort of understand what it means, because down one end of the spectrum you have the Better Access program. And I deliberately say mild anxiety and depression. I deliberately try and stick within what it is meant to be serving. And I know some people, for example, with borderline personality, they try and get treated under Better Access. It is not a system that works for them. They only have 10 sessions. It is not an appropriate system. But down the other end of the spectrum, you have the public hospital system, acute inpatient beds. That's not the appropriate setting either. So you have a group of consumers, a group of people with mental illness, where the appropriate services don't exist. Now that's recognised. We've recently had a Medicare benefits review. The sub-panel on that suggested, well, maybe we should extend Better Access and try and deal with that missing middle. I'm not sure that that's an appropriate way of dealing with it, but I do know we have to work out how to deal with that missing middle, with a cohort of people who just aren't getting the treatment they need. Where else have we got fragmentation? Well, sometimes the community supports are not where they're needed. We've heard of people being stuck in public hospital beds, in aged care facilities, in some cases, people being stuck in correctional facilities because the appropriate step-down community services are simply not available. That is not good enough. And sometimes government makes the fragmentation worse. So there's a range of federal, state and territory money that goes into mental health services and community support. It goes through a variety of channels. It includes public hospitals, MBS, PHNs, direct grants. The funding often appears uncoordinated. We've seen examples of gaps in services. We've also seen examples of overlap, where territory, but I narrows it down to two, so you can probably work out which place I'm talking about, where territory programs and federal programs have been going on side by side. The 5th National Mental Health Plan notes the importance of co-commissioning to try and get around this issue of service overlaps and service gaps. The PHNs and the LHNs are meant to be trying to reduce this coordination problem. At best you can say that's a work in progress. We've seen some excellent examples, Murrumbidgee, PHN and the LHN out there in Wagga, great example. We've also come across PHNs and LHNs that do not talk to each other. They're meant to be co-commissioning. Now, this fragmentation of services leads to a range of questions. How do we ensure Australians who require appropriate mental health care are able to access that care in a timely and appropriate way? How do we provide the appropriate incentives for the service providers, clinicians, hospitals and NGOs to have the right services where they're needed? How do we assist services to connect, to create a seamless path of step care for consumers? How do we ensure coordination of funding through different levels of government? Who should be responsible for funding of the services How much should be funded through the MBS? How much through other funding mechanisms? Is co-commissioning by PHNs and LHNs a long-term solution, or do we need a different approach? Just a few of the questions we're trying to grapple with. Now, not surprisingly, I'm an economist, so I've got into funding. The key issue is not just how to fund the services, but how much and in what areas. There's significant evidence that there can be considerable long-term gains from short-term interventions to improve mental health. But who funds those interventions? And services that improve mental health may not strictly speaking be health expenditures. They may relate to housing. So for example, we've heard from people involved in Housing First, and the evidence is there that a Housing First approach, particularly for young people with mental health issues who are homeless, it works. But who pays for it? Who's responsible for it? How do we get out of a government mindset that says, oh, my department can't spend money in health because I'm in housing? How do we get out of a government mindset that says that's a state responsibility, I'm the federal government, or vice versa, I'm the state government and it's a federal responsibility? How do we avoid the buck passing? How do we get around the problem that, oh, okay, we spend the money today, we don't see gains until 5, 6, 7 years? Hey, that's 2 election cycles away, give us a break. How do we move the government to an investment mindset so that they have incentives to spend today, perhaps in one portfolio area like housing, to see a long-term payoff in another area like health? Let me very quickly go through just a few more areas because I did promise I'd try and make up a bit of the time. Service navigation. You need service navigation. I'm not going to mention Partners in Recovery and FAMS. Some of you will know that we've had service navigation. The money's about to disappear. We need service navigation. The reason why I found out about Partners in Recovery and FAMS is I was in a meeting and I said, it's so obvious, people need help navigating this ridiculously complex system. Even if the clinical navigation works, the psychosocial navigation doesn't. And the people in the room burst out laughing. I said, oh yeah, we have that, it's about to be defunded. Gateways. Yeah, I probably didn't make up anything out of that. There are numerous gateways in the mental health system. The mental health system has many doors, but not all of them open to appropriate care. So GPs are one door. For many people, GPs are the first people they see to get into the mental health system. But GP is far from the only door. I'm not going to go into whether GPs work or not. Again, we've heard various experiences. I've already mentioned emergency departments, public hospitals, the police. They're alternative doorways. Not clear they work very well. The justice system more broadly is a doorway, but it's far from clear that that doorway leads to appropriate institutions and care. Indeed, it's been put to us that prisons have become de facto alternative forms of institutionalisation for those with mental illness. I was on the WA prisons inquiry, and certainly my experience from the WA prisons, it is outrageous. And quite frankly, I was on radio, I'm on the record from my rollover when I was in WA, of saying it is an outrage what happens in the prison system. Centrelink and public housing are also doorways. If mental illness leads to a loss of employment or of accommodation, the local Centrelink office is often the first port of call. But does that lead to appropriate mental health care? Shaking of heads, I won't comment. Schools and workplaces are a doorway. They're places where mental health issues are often first recognised. But how do we make sure that recognition leads to appropriate support and treatment? More broadly, how do we move from a system with many doors, but where only some of them work, to a no wrong door system? Where an individual can be confident that they will move down a path of support and treatment, and where possible, recovery for mental ill health, no matter how they enter the system. Very quickly, 2 of those gateways in particular that I want to mention. First, the workplace. The reason why I didn't get here until halfway through the morning is that one of the issues that we're trying to tackle is mentally healthy workplaces. How do you set up mentally healthy workplaces when the main system of financial support relating to mental ill health that is either caused by or is predominantly caused by the workplace is workers' compensations insurance schemes, where those schemes require causality. And where causality, trying to show causality, you know, and again, I'm not a clinician, but when I talk to the clinician, they sort of say, oh, it's not clear it actually